All right. Well, welcome to CareerQuest. I'm Celeste Grootman. I'm the CEO of DataQuest. DataQuest is an online experiential learning platform, and we work step by step with students to help them build technical data skills. More than ever, everyone needs data and programming skills to succeed. So we're really seeing a broadening in the market of employers needing folks who have these skills across all areas of the organization. So it's a great time to be adding these. The CareerQuest is co-hosted in partnership with Kishana Peck. She's the CEO of WomenX in Data Science, and Kishana is a trailblazer in this industry. She has over a decade of experience leading data teams across nonprofits, fintech, and advertising. And she's also the founder of Canada's first conference for women in data, and that's actually coming up soon. We'll hear from Kishana about that in a little while as well. So yeah, thank you, Kishana. We're so thrilled that you're sharing your expertise and passion with us. And then we have Pooja Loftus today with us. She is a senior data scientist at Netflix. She received a master's in statistics from Rutgers. And then she began her career as a junior analyst at Stanford University. And eventually, after 6 years of working at Stanford, she ended up leading the statistical consulting lab at Stanford School of Medicine. After that, she worked as a research scientist at Meta, a quantitative user researcher at Twitter, and then she managed a data science team at Spotify. So she's learned a ton along the way. If you are looking to get started and grow your career in data, Pooja has the information that you need to grow and get started. So we hope that you're going to leave this conversation feeling inspired and ready to take the next steps in your own career. Yeah, welcome, Kishana and Pooja. We're so thrilled to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Celeste.
Yes,
I'm
thank you.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today, Pooja. As you know, we have a lot of questions to get through. Can we first start maybe with you walking us through your transition from academia to becoming a senior data scientist?
Sure. So I just kind of stepped into the academic world without fully intending to get into it. At the time, I was dating a PhD student at Stanford, and so I was like literally living at Stanford, and so I also had a really long commute at the time. I would commute from the South Bay to northern San Francisco, which, if you're from the Bay Area, you know is like a brutal commute. So then I thought, I really don't want to commute anymore. What can I do to like not commute? And that's literally how I started working at Stanford. I took a pay cut and got this like very low level data wrangling job. And I climbed the ladder at Stanford and did a lot of work with like different groups of people, like economists and health researchers, and published like almost 20 journal articles and just did a lot of interesting work, and it was so cool. But then I knew towards the end of my time at Stanford that my future wasn't in academia. And it's because I really didn't have much of an interest in getting a PhD. I saw how difficult it had been for my partner to go down that path, and I was just glad to be done with school, and I wanted to apply my skills in more, like traditional settings. And so I knew like if I didn't get a PhD, there was a glass ceiling at Stanford where I reached the top of what I could do with a master's degree. And so I also at the time was leaving California to follow my partner to his job in New York City. And so I'm like, okay, I need a job that's not academia. So I applied extensively, and I had this like very brutal 8-month long like I felt like it was a dozen interviews at Meta before I ended up landing a job there. And um I didn't know anything when I joined. I didn't know about tech levels. I didn't know about equity. I didn't negotiate anything. I was just happy to have a job and didn't give any of that any thought. So that was one area where I really regret not doing my homework before. But it was not as hard of a transition as one would think because Stanford is in the middle of Silicon Valley and has that sort of tech feel to it where you're juggling a lot of different projects. Everyone's trying to do the latest thing with whether it's like AI or back then it was ML or whatever it was. So it wasn't that hard of a transition in terms of the work. It was like, work hard, understand your space, figure out what the needs are, and apply your skills. The part that was really hard though was impact. It's like such a buzzword in tech companies, but especially at Meta where like I knew like in academia impact meant publishing papers and it was very clear, but how do you define what you're doing and sell it and show like the impact of that to the business as a data scientist? I think that was one of the hardest things for me transitioning into tech. So did I answer the question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you answered that question and a few ahead. So that definitely answers it. And it seems like it's a very interesting transition, but you were like brave enough to do it, but you also noticed like there are some things that I could have tweaked, I could have checked. And I'm sure you brought those lessons into the roles that you held after, right? Like I imagine you were negotiating
Oh
properly for the next
yes.
roles.
I would ask what level is this role at in the future instead of just assuming that we're all the same level and it doesn't matter.
Mhm. And do you have like any key tips for negotiating or figuring out the levels for those that might be transitioning into their first data roles?
Yeah, there's a website called Levels FYI, and it does explain what the levels are at the different tech companies and how they kind of stack and compare against each other because it's not always the same. It's very company dependent, and so that shows you like what this level at Google might look like at the same level at Meta, and it might have a different name, and it might, but it helps you understand like where you might be in terms of experience and where you can try to negotiate. And then the other negotiation tip that I have a hard time with, but it's really good, is to never say the first number, like never be the one.
Never. Yeah,
Never. Like,
ever.
don't do that. And the only time I have is when they've really pushed me and I know I was making, like, top of market before, and I would say I was making this and I'd like to, um, like and that's not the smartest move, actually, like, I shouldn't have done that, and I succumbed to pressure, but I have said, like, this is what I was making just to anchor it a little bit because I didn't want to take a huge pay cut. Like,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing that.
don't
So
do that either.
don't do
Yeah,
that.
they're
That.
very pricey though, but there are scripts online, and I think I actually used ChatGPT one time, at my most recent job to, just to understand, like, what are some scripts or some things I can say in response to the pressure the recruiters put on you to say the number first, and that was actually pretty useful. So,
Yeah.
I recommend that, yeah.
I always ask first. Like I'm like, what do you got?
You
Because
can
I know
ask,
you have it
yeah.
budgeted somewhere. There's no way that you're hiring and you don't have a budget. You definitely have a
And
budget. You
you
have a
just ask,
range.
"What's the range for this
Yeah.
role?" Yeah,
And then like the money I was making before is really none of your business. So I
yeah,
never
that's
give
true.
I never give the number. But I always have it in my head that like the number that I give them is like at least like 10% more than I'm expecting just in case they come below.
Mhm,
You know what I mean? So then I
totally.
could be
They're
like, oh
going
well,
to
that
fund
was where I was planning to land anyways.
And the other thing is it depends where you're located. In some markets in the US, they now post the salary range, which is super useful. And it can be really wide. Like I know Netflix is like 90K to 700K for some of these jobs, which tells you absolutely nothing.
Mhm.
But what is interesting is that it also varies by country. So when I moved to London in the UK, I had to take like a 40% pay cut
Oh my
even
gosh.
at the same company just because they have different pay structures based on the labor market. So that wasn't fun, but it does vary a lot and I don't in the UK they don't reveal salaries at all. So it's like you have to play the game.
Yeah, it seems like your path was definitely not linear. It had like ups, downs, pay cuts, pay level ups, pay
Yeah.
like relaxing. How did you find that your early experience in university research prepared you for tech roles?
Yeah, so when I just am this like compulsive people pleaser, and in my university role, that worked out okay for the most part, but there were some people I worked with, especially when I worked with economists at Stanford, where they like I am not a trained economist, I'm a trained statistician. So a lot of the language that they used was a little bit different from what I was used to for some of the same concepts. And I just had this idea like I don't want to like imposter syndrome. I don't want to out myself as not knowing things. So I'm just going to take notes and figure it out on my own later, even if that means being at my desk at 10 p.m. I'm just going to figure it out later. I'm not going to bother them with questions. And it took me a while to learn that you really need to ask questions. And it's the smartest people in the room. And you see this in tech companies all the time, who are the people in meetings that will say things like, just so I understand. And then they'll repeat what was just said in like clearer language. And I'm like, okay, I need to be that person and not the person that's like, I understand, and then like freaking out in the background, like trying to do the right thing, doing the wrong thing. And so that was a really hard lesson. Like, ask the questions, understand the problem, be able to define it clearly. It'll save me time. I'll end up doing like the thing I'm actually supposed to be doing. And a lot of the time I realize the people like I'm working with, stakeholders, like don't actually know the question in their own head. Like they don't actually know what they want. They're just saying stuff. And when you push them to define things is when they actually trip up a little bit, which is good because it saves you a lot of time. So I found asking a lot of questions at Stanford was like a skill I had to learn, and then bringing that into tech was pretty useful and good. Also, just juggling a lot of different kinds of projects, which I'm sure you've had to do, where it's like, which do I work on first? What do I prioritize? How do I use my time wisely? So that juggling you had to do in academia, and then I like carried that into tech too.
Yeah, it looks like you learned a lot of good lessons transferring from academia to tech and the probing of questions. Like, I feel like all of the best data professionals that I know, like, they spend a good amount of time on that up front to ensure that
Mhm.
you're not like building the complete wrong thing. And they also have like a good partnership with the stakeholders. So it's an iterative process. Like, if you think you're going to be a data professional sitting in a dark room and talk to no one, like, I don't know how often that happens.
Yeah, and that does sound pretty bleak too.
Yeah, it does.
But, in tech, it was actually more organized, I found, like, academia can be really unorganized, like, nobody really checks your code, first of all, like, you can do kind of anything, it's like a little bit of a cowboy situation, and, I found things in tech to be more regimented, like, there's more validation. If you're working on a new project, there might be a research brief where you kind of define the problem really clearly and people comment on it. So there's get learning to be more organized was actually, like, a bit of a hurdle for me transitioning into tech.
That is definitely something unexpected for me because I would have expected academia to be more organized.
They're just like the absent-minded professor stereotype exists for a very good reason.
Working across entertainment, social media, and music streaming platforms, I'm like, how many of the letters do you have in, I don't know what they call themselves now.
The
It's not
EGOT thing? No,
it's not Fang, it's like something else now. Like
oh. Oh,
yeah.
yeah, they changed it from Fang. I don't know, it's like my husband says it's like a bingo card where I'm trying to fill out the whole card.
I mean,
Yeah,
Netflix, hold on to this one.
I
How
know.
do you find that data science applications differ across the different industry types?
Data science, it doesn't differ at all in terms of industry type so much as terms of the team you're on and like the what you're doing within that company. So, And also the data science name can be like really different from company to company. So you could be a data scientist at all these different companies, but do wildly different kinds of work. Whereas I think at Meta, the data scientists tended to be more in the realm of like data engineering and pipeline building and experimentation, A/B testing. And at Meta, I was a research scientist, which is actually what a data scientist is at places like Netflix. So I like the titles don't mean anything. So don't like get hung up on the data science title when you're applying for jobs, and just try to be really creative about all the different terms, search terms that there are, because they all might lead to what you want. But it depends on the team. So at Twitter, I did more user research, mixed methods, kind of quant UX work, and that was like very different in scope. It was more like writing surveys and doing weighting and running focus groups and trying to tie what we could from our internal data sources with what we were seeing people saying in these user interviews and meshing that information together to influence product strategy. At Meta, I did a lot of work with ads research, so that was just very different from what I do now at Netflix, which is global public policy research. Like very, very different animals. So I think that is more different than the fact that Netflix is entertainment and Meta is like ads, social media.
Mhm. And I
Yeah,
think you also touched on like the broadness of potential projects that you'd be working on, with like a core set of data skills, and also the
exactly.
fact that like I've said this a billion times, like these job descriptions and these titles, like they really don't mean anything. You have to look at the description. Like it's almost
Yeah.
like you need a cluster of like these titles, or like these keywords are like data analyst, these ones are data engineer, these ones are data scientist. Like it's almost like you need to come up with your own like word web of like look for these keywords.
That's such good advice. When they say you need to know certain things like Java, like you know it's a certain type of role. And
Yeah.
then when they say, you know, you should know like R, it's a different type of role. So the type of skills and tools that they have in these descriptions do sometimes hint at what kind of a role it is. And that that is something important to pay attention to. You're absolutely right about that.
For those that are more early career, and don't have like the strong academic background that you have, what would you suggest to them if they're looking at like I forget what they're called, not Fang, whatever their new name is,
Yeah.
as like I want to work at like Google, or I want to work at Meta, or I want to work at such and such. Like, what is your suggestions for them?
I guess it's important to keep an eye on job postings and see, you know, what you might qualify for, whether it's an internship or like a junior role if you don't really have a lot of experience and you want to start building that up. So apply widely. There's this notion that you need a referral and applications don't work, but basically every job I've had, I've never had a referral. I've always just applied and it's like somehow worked out. A couple of my jobs I've gotten by recruiters reaching out to me, but that was only later on in my career. But don't be afraid to apply. And one of the things is it matters when you apply. So after a job is posted, after it's been up for a while and there's like a lot of applications, you might have less of a chance of scoring an interview if you wait too long. So if you try to have like alerts in LinkedIn placed in so that when an applicable job is posted and just like have all of your material ready so you can quickly apply, that could be useful. The other thing to break into a large company is being good at interviewing, which is hard to do, easy to say. And the biggest tip there is practice. So even like every time I've needed to interview for jobs, the first couple of interviews I've done have been like, it's like making pancakes. The first pancake is you throw it out. Like it's not as good as the other pancakes. So like never do your first interview at your dream job. Do your maybe apply for jobs that you don't even really want and practice your pancakes a little bit. And then when you're interviewing for that job that you're really excited about, you'll be ready with quick responses and scenarios and all of that that you need. And there's a lot of skills you can leverage to impress these large tech companies to show that you're a thoughtful data scientist who can like add value. And it's a lot of talking to different kinds of personalities and being able to sell yourself.
Mhm. Would you say that like portfolios and being able to show your work helps in place of having like a formal degree?
Um, it might, they might. So a lot of these jobs will say like it'd be nice to have master's or PhD, but you don't need one. If you don't have any formal degree at all, it might be a little bit more difficult because you're competing against a lot of people that do have very advanced degrees. Portfolios are good, but they might not replace the degree entirely. It just depends on how, maybe if it's a startup or a smaller company, I think they're more flexible in what you can get away with.
Mhm.
Um, Larger companies have like big HR, like they might have requirements that are a little more bureaucratic.
Mhm. And also it's with working with the smaller companies, you might have more like agency and more like
Yeah,
be able to contribute more as well. So like
yeah,
think I don't, because I know some people when they don't get like one of those type of jobs, they're like, oh man, like I'm a failure, or like they always tell me no. But I feel like the riches are also in the niches. Like if you find some
totally.
smaller companies, like you could still be happy and have like a strong career as well.
When I was at Spotify, the best data scientist there was someone I managed, or like in my opinion, one of the best data scientists there was someone I managed actually, and she was amazing. And all of her skills were from working at a really small startup. And she would say it was so much harder there than it was at Spotify in terms of the workload and wearing different hats and doing different kinds of things. And Spotify was very straightforward, and she had a lot more free time, and it was a lot simpler. But I don't think she would have gotten the job at Spotify had she not built up that experience first at the startup. So it can be a good stepping stone for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. How would you say working on ads and monetizations differ from consumer insights work?
I think it's like a different kind of stakeholder is like the best response I can say. So a lot of it's like different tribes in the company for these different kinds of products or teams. So ads and monetization, a lot of the people have backgrounds in economics. And Kishan, I know you have some background in economics. So I
Feel-
feel
Whenever I
okay
hear
saying
it
this.
in an episode, I'm like, I chose the right major because it keeps popping up.
But they do, and economists, as you may know, tend to have a certain, I don't want to say ruthlessness, but like practicality and focus on optimizing and focus on, you know, certain aspects of the problem and solving the problem that consumer insights group are a little bit cuddlier and softer and have like a different way of presenting their work. It's more about when you present your work in ads and monetization, it's often more technical. You do have to get to the so what and tell the story and all of that, but it's more like these are the models and this is like how the mechanics of it work as well. Whereas with consumer insights, you have like a flashy deck and the user research style of being like these are my top recommendations and it's just a different vibe and a different way of presenting yourself. And it took me a while to learn how to do that at Twitter actually, but it was a fun challenge.
And how would you say, like, which skills were the most transferable as you were switching companies, switching basically like the type of role and the type of focus?
Um, Yeah, so when I was at Facebook, I thought I was just tired of working with data. Like, I was tired of pulling data, and I was tired I was just tired. I was just tired, Kashana. Like, I
I'm
was
like,
like,
this
"I'm tired.
is a data
This is
podcast.
my job, but I'm tired." And it was like there's this idea that big tech companies have, like, amazing data, and it's, like, everything you want, and it's all there, but it's not true. Like, you actually have to work really hard to get the data to be what you want it to be, and it's often a mess, and it's really hard to keep doing that after I was there for 3 years, and I was just tired, and I thought, "I'd like my job more if I didn't have to work with data." But, like, I like talking to people and understanding the problems and working with product people and all of the other parts of the job, so I thought, "These user researchers, like, they've got it figured out because 'cause they're not working with data, but they're also doing all the other fun stuff, and they seem to have so much more fun than me." So, I asked a senior user researcher at Facebook, like, "How did you break into this field? Because you have a background in data, and how did you do it?" And she said, "Fake it till you make it," which I'm
Mhm.
like, I didn't really fake anything. I got my job at Twitter by just emphasizing the user research parts, like, which were really small in actuality, but I just talked about them a lot until they gave me a job, and so I'm like so I had so transferring so basically it was like mimicry, like just seeing what the good people were doing and copying that, but not like straight up copying, just understanding like what's the style, like what are they doing that's successful and
Mhm.
works. And that meant going through their presentations, going through their final reports and materials and understanding like this is why this person's work is really good because they're telling the story very clearly or they're presenting their work in this style that really works with the stakeholders. And so learning that and copying it and just being good at copying, I think was helpful. Not literally copying, but just understanding what works. And
Inspired by
exactly. It's
excellence. That's what that
the
is.
best form of flattery. Yes.
Using templates, tried and true, not having to like recreate everything, especially if you're learning a new domain. It doesn't make sense, but you were also able to identify like which pieces of the data work you're already doing is transferable to this role. And you probably explained it clear enough for them that like you sold
Yeah,
it to them. That yeah,
totally.
this makes sense.
Exactly, and that was useful for being in new spaces, like, so going into a new industry where I don't know how anything works, but just the way to ramp up is to see what, like, the best people are doing and see how you can get yourself from where you are to there, efficiently, I guess.
I I know some beginners usually shy away from the math side, and you have a background in statistics. So after going through all these roles, what would you say are some of the core statistical concepts that remain consistent, like regardless of the role, or at least like common themes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There's it I think the basic programming skills you have, whether it's in Python or R or whatever that you pick up from stats, it's not super mathy, it's more coding. I think having the basic skills there is really important. Um, and it helps you work with data. SQL, which is not statistics either. What would be statistics? I
I know,
think, oh, you know
don't
what?
convince me that we don't need it anymore because me and stats had a
We
tussle back then.
I think for stats, it's a lot of, like, modeling and knowing which kinds of models to use for what kind of data. So, sometimes you have data with a lot of outliers or it's, like, small sample sizes and you have different issues, and if you know, like, nonparametric methods to address some of that. So, like, you're running a correlation and you have these data issues, do like Spearman and not Pearson, and uh, basically how to troubleshoot problems with your data using a variety of statistical methods is like super useful. I have used ChatGPT to get ideas. Like I'm like, I have data with these issues and these are the methods I'm thinking of. Is there anything I'm missing? I wouldn't trust it entirely to just be like, do this analysis, because I think it's important to have a backbone in understanding the methods yourself, because it can hallucinate and it also doesn't pick up on all the things that you may need. And so being able to check the answers, but just use it for inspiration or more ideas. So like there's this idea, especially amongst junior data scientists, that you can use ChatGPT or LLMs to just kind of replace all coding and stats knowledge. And I think that's absolutely false. Like you cannot, like you need to know the stuff yourself, because it's a tool to help you be better, but it doesn't replace like the basics that you should know and be able to correct when it's wrong.
You'll be easily fooled. Like if you don't have the
Yeah,
foundations, then you won't even be able to question the output at all. And then it's almost like the blind leading the blind. Because like, what if?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I've seen it like even in my master's program, there were some people that like heavily relied on ChatGPT to like do their work, and I was just like, but you're never going to learn anything, and you're probably missing all of these things because you're heavily relying on it.
Yeah.
um and we always caution against like putting your data in there as well. Like don't do
Yeah,
that
I
if
know
you
what's
work somewhere.
happening.
Like I need you
Yeah.
to hear that Pooja said, I'm working on this type of problem and these are the ways I'm thinking of solving it, not just like here it is, tell me what's wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll be like, I'm getting this error message and these are the things I've tried. What else can I try? And it's useful for that because it gives you more things to try. But like 2 out of 3 times what it's giving me doesn't even work. And so me having to troubleshoot that is still a manual process.
Yeah, I find the same thing. And it's like some things are just common sense. Well, not common sense, but as a data professional, it'll be common sense to you that will just
Yeah,
be completely missed.
100%.
So if you're looking on cheating on those take homes that you have for interviews, don't do that.
You're only cheating yourself,
You're
and I
only
feel
cheating
so old saying that.
yourself. Exactly. And you don't want to cheat yourself. Like,
But also in interviews, I've interviewed a lot of junior data scientists, and you can tell been using ChatGPT a little too much because
mm,
they don't have that depth of knowledge for the basic questions. So a lot of times you can, ask things like, tell me about a time you've had to struggle through a problem and what are the different things you tried. And when the answer is I just put it into ChatGPT and just copy and paste it, it doesn't lead to a good interview as it does when you've like actually struggled through something and can talk about it.
yeah, and I feel like trial and error is like that's one of the like marks of honor you just have to like do here. Like trial and error, you can be wrong. But I find like some of the interviews, they're not even checking if you get it right. They're checking like what is your thought process when you are getting errors, right?
100%. Yeah, I don't really honestly care about the answers most of the time. We just want to see how you think about it.
Hmm. And if you think about it, like, let me put this in the LLM, it's not going to work out.
Like, I could do that. I could do that. You know what, though? I was just realizing that if LLMs existed when I was like early in my career, I don't know if I would have gotten the early jobs I had. Like, one of the first things I had to do at Stanford was translate SAS code into R code,
Mm.
which is like something LLMs could do for you in 30 seconds. It took me a month to just like power through that. And I don't know, like I think it's useful, but it also takes away from jobs that can help young people kind of get their foot in the door. So there's this dark side to it too, where I think like it's like I remember that South Park, like they took her jobs, but like it's a little bit it's a little bit like that where it's you have to be careful because you want to be able to work at these roles early in your career that give you kind of an exposure to different industries and like the office setting and cool projects. But if people are using LLMs to do that sort of work that the junior data scientists would be doing and then not hiring junior data scientists, I do worry what will happen to the next generation if we don't train them up from that level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense because it's like they're saying like, oh, but you can automate a data analyst, for example. Like I've seen the
Yeah,
ads and it's just like, okay, well, if you can automate like the initial data analyst, but not like the senior ones or like the data scientists or the senior data scientists or the machine learning engineers, then who is doing the apprenticeship in order to become senior?
exactly,
Like there's
exactly.
going to
And
be
you
a
need that.
very
You
big gap.
absolutely
Yeah.
need that. So it's something I worry about. Yeah.
Yeah. But would you say you're mostly seeing that in like larger companies that like that gap would exist, like the beginner companies or the startups? Like is there more room for entry level? Like what would your analysis be on that?
I honestly have no idea. I know at larger companies they have cut hiring for junior roles. They're still hiring and there's still roles, but I think the way to differentiate yourself now isn't just that you're like good at coding, which is something that can be automated, a little bit, but rather that you are like a thoughtful person who can define problems well and maybe have a deeper understanding of the statistical or math side of things. Things that you can't really replace with AI yet.
Mhm.
Hopefully ever. Yeah.
And also, I guess like how innovative you are as a data professional. Because like there's
Yeah.
one thing to like just do the job. Like for example, you said you were translating SAS to R. And it's another
Yes,
thing to say like when we translate this from SAS to R, we could probably like have these improvements as well.
exactly. Yeah, and it wasn't just it's like translating a language. You don't just translate
Hmm.
from the language exactly. You also think of like what it sounds like and the metaphors. So it can be a bit like that too.
Yeah. And then did you like what kind of patterns and challenges do you commonly see among early career data professionals that you mentor?
The biggest one, and I saw this as a manager more because I was paying attention more as a manager is not being able to tell a clear, succinct story.
Mhm.
So a lot of times you do your analysis and you're really excited by all the output and the code and like all the assumptions you checked. And you make maybe a Google Doc where you put all of that down and then you're presenting your work to stakeholders and they actually don't care about any of that. All they care about is like the so what? Like, so what does this mean for them? Like, what's the implication? And so being able to tell the story really clearly with, bullet points, really focused on your audience and knowing like, okay, my audience is product people. They're going to launch this product. They want to know how it could be made better in this particular area. And so leading with that and then maybe like having details of your analysis like further down, but just really telling a clear story up front. That's like if you have 5 seconds to just look at this doc, like you would have all the takeaways.
Yeah, the storytelling piece is extremely important, especially when dependent on your role. Like you might not even have that much face time with the stakeholder, um,
Yeah.
or like someone who's more senior to speak to. So it's like you
Yeah.
kind of need to have your pitch of like why is this important to you at all? Because if you go in and it's a straight technical conversation, they're probably half asleep through it. Um,
Hmm.
so so yeah,
Yeah.
I completely agree. Like that is an art that I like mastered when I was in corporate. Because it's like I needed to be able to display why the work my team is doing makes sense and why they should care and why we should continue doing the work. Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. And that actually was hard from academia to industry a little bit because in academia they care more about the details and they
Mhm.
have more patience for the details and the storytelling is less important to them there. Like it's more we'll write a long journal article and they'll have an abstract, but it won't be like a tight, punchy story like we care about in tech. And I've gone to a lot of academic presentations. My partner's an academic, and I like after being in tech for so long, I can't stand it. It's just I want to be like, get to the point.
What's some final advice you'd give to aspiring data scientists from non-traditional backgrounds?
Oh, I would think about what your superpower is and try to leverage that. So, I, I was actually a history major um, for a while. Changed my major a bunch. I was pre-med, and then I decided follow your bliss, and I studied ancient history for a while. And I became like quite skilled at writing, telling stories, doing research, and then pivoted to stats because it was just more practical. And but like my skills from my time as a historian, I think were actually more helpful for a lot of my work than as a statistician. Like I like being a strong writer and being a strong communicator were things I could promote like as like something to set myself apart from the pack. And if you have a non-traditional background, just think like what do you have that is different from everyone else and use your non-traditional background as like something that is going to propel you rather than hold you back.
That is great advice. Thank you so much, Pooja. I see that Celeste has joined us back for questions.
Yeah. I think that's incredible advice. And actually, DataQuest founder Vic was a history major and had his degree in history, and was a self-taught machine learning engineer. So and he is an exceptional writer. So I get that. Who knew? Study history to be a better writer. The thank you so much. This has been incredible. Before we go into the Q&A, Kishana has an event coming up, and I know we have some Canadians and some folks living up near Toronto that might be interested. Kishana, do you want to tell us a little bit what you have coming up in May?
Sure. So as Celeste mentioned, I am the CEO of Women X in Data Science. We've been in operation since 2018. We brought the first Women in Data Science conference to Canada. We have three different streams. We have a technical, business, and an executive lounge at the conference this year. It's on May 1st in Toronto. Tickets are live now. I'll put them in the chat. You also get headshots, you get lunch, things from a gifting lounge. There's mentor download sessions where you can speak to a data professional for 20 minutes, like any question that you have. And we also have different exhibitors that are actively hiring. So if that's of interest to you, I will put that link in the chat.
Amazing, amazing. I've heard so many amazing things about your conferences in the past. I hope that I can come this year. The so Yeah, I wanted to touch on a few things that we talked about because I talk to students every day, and there's a lot of anxiety, especially around this. Is AI taking junior roles? And I think that my takeaway from what you said is you have to do this work if you want to become a senior. It doesn't matter if AI can do it. And yes, like you're absolutely right. There are so many things that I've spent months on, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, like, yes, I just did that in a few minutes. I kind of want to ran my head into the wall, but I know that I wouldn't be capable of doing the things that I do now had I not had that experience. If you skip it because you can do this, you're not going to get there. And I think that's just incredible advice. I think the way you distill that down was great. So if you're not able to get that role at a FANG, whatever we're calling it now, I don't know either. This is terrible. We need to figure this out. The you gotta do it for yourself. And so DataQuest provides amazing projects, and they've been published thousands of times on the internet. So the LLMs are really, really good at solving our projects. That they've been trained on them. So yes, you can absolutely do the work that you're finding on DataQuest with an LLM, but if you do it, you are cheating yourself and you're giving AI your job because you're not building the skills that you need. So so now we'll go into, that's my tirade for the day. Let's go over to our Q&A. We talked a little bit about standing out in your career, and I think you spoke to follow your passion. And I spoke about this a little bit at the beginning. We're seeing a broadening, right? So it's not just that the data teams need the data science skills, it's that all the teams now need the data skills to be able to leverage the AI. They need that junior experience somewhere else. Can you speak to like maybe some examples of other people that you've seen come in with non-traditional backgrounds? I know you talked about a colleague who started at a startup. I'm a big fan of startups, but yeah, what are some other stories you have?
I think it's more typical than we realize. Like everyone I've worked with at these FANG companies has a non-traditional background, more or less. Like a common theme is that maybe they worked at an agency for a while and the agency did some work with the FANG and they got to know people at the large company and they were like interested in joining the large company. So they had a contact through that working relationship established through the agency, and so they were able to transfer that way, like an agency meaning like a consulting firm or a small startup that did some work for a large company, which is pretty common. And so that's a common path as well. And a lot of times there are like internships that we hire straight out, like we will often hire PhDs, but even if you don't have a PhD but you've done other stuff and have some experience, you can still apply for those jobs and try to explain like why you're interested and passionate about the role, and you can still kind of get in that way too. So there are a lot of different paths. What else? A lot of people I know in the consumer insights area have backgrounds in the social sciences, which is pretty common, but they might have, like my manager at Twitter actually worked at MTV for a long time. So she did a lot of like coordination. It was that MTV program where like people, I don't know, it's been a while, but she did a lot of work that was kind of not related to tech in any way, and then used the skills she'd garnered there to transfer into tech. And um, it I yeah, so building up your skills and being able to talk about them even if it's not direct is like super good.
Yeah, so finding the industry that you're passionate about, even in tech, right? Is it
Yeah.
music that you're passionate about? Is it government? Is it nonprofits that you're passionate about? Finding those things and gaining that knowledge and then applying it to the skills that you're learning, sort of marrying those two things together, even if it's not a data role to start getting that industry and vertical experience. So I love this question. Is it okay to transition your career at age 33? You're a baby. I love that you asked this. 33. What's the average age of the people that you're working with, Pooja? Let's talk about that a little. I think there's a lot of
Aged with me somehow. So I'm 38, and when I worked at Stanford, everyone was in their 20s, just as I was. And then when I worked at Meta, everyone was in their late 20s and early 30s. And then at Twitter, it felt like mid 30s, and Spotify as well. And now Netflix skews older. So a lot of folks are in their upper 30s. And so I feel like they've aged with me, but that's very biased and probably wrong. And there's all people of all ages everywhere. Actually, I just don't pay attention.
you can
So,
find the people who are your own age at these companies.
but I remember thinking like, should I do a PhD? Maybe I should do a PhD while I was at Stanford. And at the time, I was 27 or 26, and I was already had been working for a while, and I was managing people, and I talked to a postdoc. I'm like, do you think I should get a PhD? What do you think? And he was like, yeah, if you want to. And I was like, yeah, you know what though? I'll be in my 30s when I graduate with that PhD. That is old. Like I can't possibly. And I didn't realize he was like 35, and he just laughed in my face and he was like, "You're such a baby. Like you can't think like that." But there's a good quote like, "Would you rather be 30 or 40 or whatever and having had done the thing, then you're going to be that age anyway. And whether you do the thing or not, you're going to be that age if you don't die. And so it's better to have done what you wanted to do than to not because of your hang up about age."
Yeah, and I
That,
feel like age is such a like time is gonna pass regardless. Like doesn't matter. Is anyone
Yeah.
checking you at the door and saying, "Oh my God, you're 33. What are you doing here in a entry level?" No one is doing that. And isn't that
that
like against a lot of HR policies to even do that?
the yeah, well, first of all, 30 is not old. 40 is not old. I talked to a lot of my peers starting to be mature learners who are transitioning roles. And again, I think that now you actually have an advantage if you have some experience outside of data, because you are able to bring that other knowledge that really makes you very competitive in the space. And so I would say it's actually easier than it ever was before, to make those transitions later in your career, which is not at 33. So you're fine. Keep going. Do it. Transition.
The game just
Um, so we talked a little bit about university degree, and having a bachelor's, and so we definitely touched on this. I touched on DataQuest founder actually has a background in history. What are some of the different bachelor's degrees that you ran across? Yeah, who's it's not all stats, I know, right? You talked a little bit about economics.
It's like weirdly common to see economics. Like I don't know why, but I see so many former economists. Like it's like half. Like half of the people have backgrounds in economics. And I love it. I love economists. I love how practical they are. So it's great, but you also see like social sciences. You see everything. Like there isn't really any particular thing. I think sometimes when you see something really different, like journalism or law, it does inspire more interesting conversations, and I do think it's great to see that diversity in it, and like no one wants to hire like all the same type of person. They want to hire different kinds of people. So if you can bring something different, it can be really helpful actually.
Uh, um, yeah, I think back to, we have a lot of universities that add DataQuest to supplement. And they're not adding it in the data science master's program. It is in social sciences. It is in government, political science. So a lot of universities recognize the need for these skills across those domains as well. We're getting kind of to the end. And so I just want to, and I always get caught up in these conversations and then I forget to read the questions. So we have several people saying how much they enjoyed the session. So again, thank you, Pooja and Kishana, for today. It's been really enlightening. So we do have somebody that's asking about transitioning industries. Yeah, is there anything that you did to learn about the industry that you were going to? I know like you like transitioned, you did a lot of marketing research at Facebook. Like how did you sort of learn about marketing before you went into?
I knew nothing about ads when I joined Facebook, and I think that like I think we shouldn't make a big deal about what industry companies are in. You should just apply freely and everywhere, regardless of your background in these industries, because that is the part of the job that they don't necessarily expect you to know because it's so specific at every company. So even if you're an expert at ads in one company, like it might work completely differently at another company. So they know that it's different at each place. So you don't really need to come in with much of a background. But that said, there's like, I remember I had a notebook when I joined Facebook where I just wrote down all the acronyms that were mostly like ad marketing related that I didn't know. And I'd hear them all the time and I couldn't even follow conversations at first because it was just like, oh, the like the lookalike model or the whatever. Like there would be these different things that would be like, what is that? And I'd write it down and then I'd Google it after the conversation and be like, ah, that's just the name of the algorithm, or that's just whatever, and that's just a thing in ads. So that was fun. And that's kind of like that everywhere. But also, if you're like really into music and you want to work at Spotify for that, you might be disappointed because a lot of the work isn't necessarily like about music. It's more like just like any data science job there is, and patching pipelines and tracking how efficacious certain machine learning algorithms were and things like that, and running tests. And it's just the same everywhere, regardless of industry. I'm a big cinema fan, so I love like old films, and I joined Netflix thinking like, finally, I'm working somewhere where I know the industry in the sense, like I'm passionate about it at least. But it kind of ruined Netflix for me in a way. Like I find it hard to relax at the end of the day by watching Netflix because I'm like, oh, I know all these things about the filming of this, and we're tracking the financials, and the data that we use to figure out how many cast and crew were hired is missing a lot of data. So I have to like patch that. Like that's where my brain is instead of following the thing. So it's like it doesn't matter what industry it is.
Don't want to take your work with you like to the couch at the end of the day,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you're just trying to turn off. I get that. So I got a great question here at the end that I think will be really good to answer. And I think Kishana, you're gonna have a really good answer to this. I know that our headlines are full of layoffs, and it can be sort of a frustrating time for everyone to see lots of anxiety around that. So, folks who have been laid off and are feeling kind of low from that and are seeing LinkedIn 500 people clicked applied on that. I really wish they wouldn't add that stat. I love stats, but like, please don't give me that information. So yeah, what's your advice to sort of tackling that, like keeping the right mindset, and yeah, and moving on from that, especially when, you
It's
know,
such a good and relevant question. It has been really rough out there. I graduated, I'm gonna date myself, in 2009 from undergrad and did my master's program in 2010. And it still had like the market was so bad. There were no data scientists back then. You had to be like an analyst or something. So it was it was like the worst market to graduate. And I remember being really, really frustrated applying everywhere, hearing nothing back. And it was rough then. And it feels like we're seeing a bit of a repeat of that right now with the layoffs. And the best advice I got that was really helpful was that it's a numbers game. So you just need one job to get your foot in the door. You can apply, you should apply for everything and anything, and don't just think like, oh, I just want to work at Google, or I just, want to work at Facebook. It's just like open your mind and work wherever you can, and leverage each piece of experience you get towards something better.
I would
I
completely agree. And also, it's like you have, like, there's like a few different things that, like, one of my old managers used to tell me. One was like, trust the timing of your life. So like, yes, you're laid off right now, and you might feel even like your skills were deteriorating, or maybe you weren't even doing the type of work that you want to do. Like, now's a good time that you could actually sit down with a notebook and like reinvent yourself. Like, what is the kind of work that I want to do? Like, what kind of companies do I want to work in? What kind of skills do I want to upskill in? And you can actually dedicate the time to that now because you are not beholden to a company, right? So you can actually kind of design like what your learning plan will be. where you want to go. And I feel like as adults, we don't usually have that time to like kind of sit down and be like, okay, like where do I want to go in the next like 2, 3 years? Like, what is my plan? And a layoff is a good time to kind of like sit down, like evaluate the market, evaluate yourself, and decide where you want to go next. Because it could be that, and I saw the note, it was like someone that like they were pulling data from multiple sources and merging them, but not really doing data scientist tasks. It's like now you could basically look and figure out like what kind of work you would want to do every day and make sure you're building up the skills for that. Because I feel like data is like a language. Like if you don't practice, you're gonna feel like you don't know. But like once you start practicing again, you'll get that confidence. So it'll help bring you out of your rut. And also like you control your life. Like no one else is controlling it for you. Like yes, you have to like wait for people to tell you yes for a job. But you can steer your own ship. There's so many companies. I remember one day I looked up to see like how many companies were in the US. It was like a crazy number. So like there must be one of them that want you and your skills. And like even something that I do, because like of course, like I'm always looking for like sponsorship or like working with different companies. Like I'll look up like which companies, like what the top companies are on like the stock exchange or like if they have their revenue open and be like, okay, I'm gonna target these 100. Meanwhile, there's like hundreds of them that have money. Or like I'll walk downtown or something and look at all the buildings with their big buildings and their shiny doors and their nice offices and be like, there's money out here. So there must be some for me too. So like you just kind of need to like expose yourself to get yourself out of the rut. You have to be really intentional about it.
I love how like if you've ever like been on a road trip and you're just driving in the middle of nowhere and you see these huge buildings with huge signs of companies you've never heard of,
Mm-hmm.
and they must be full of people working and we have no idea, So yes, there's tons of that. And so don't narrow your search. I also think, Pooja, you gave some really good advice, and I want to make sure everybody hears this because it's true. Set up those alerts, get really focused with your search, apply right away. And for those that are coming out today, those ads, got up early and do this first thing when you're fresh, is tailor your letters. Don't let everybody's using ChatGPT to optimize their resume. Everybody's using ChatGPT to write their cover letter. Don't do that. You're actually going to have a huge advantage by not doing that because everyone else is, and the recruiters are
So
so
true.
scared
And you
of
can
it.
tell
They
when
catch it like
ChatGPT
that.
agrees.
Yeah, so spend that time, maybe apply for a few less jobs, but apply right when they come online and take a minute to really personalize those responses. Don't let LinkedIn rewrite your resume. That certainly ask for advice about it, but you write your resume and you're going to come out ahead. So yeah, with that, we went 4 minutes over. I'm so sorry. Thank you, everyone. Please fill out the feedback. It really helps us improve this webinar series. Kishana, Pooja, I'm so grateful for you.